Hey everybody, Guy here from Chit Chat Podcast. I want to say Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for being a part of this growing community this last year. We have absolutely loved creating all of these podcasts. I'm so thankful to all of the guests who showed up this year to be a part of that. It has been, I think, one of the highlights of my career. Maybe I've already said that. So we just want to say thank you to all of you for continuing to listen. And we're excited about what's coming next year and pushing on and continuing with helping tell the story of what's happening in our central Minnesota community. The podcast I just got done recording today was an absolute blast. So much fun. My cousin Ian Scherber joined. Ian is a Duluth native, but went to St. John's University and has started lots of different businesses, including one right here in St. Joe called Obank Distilling. And so we got to talk about so many things. We talked about entrepreneurship and how important it is to kind of like work hard and to use the resources and tools that are available to you right now, wherever you're at kind of in your life, and to try to like do something really special with that. We talked about raising kids and families and all kinds of really fun stuff. But Ian's one of my very favorite people, and I'm super excited for you to kind of get to know him a little bit here and hear about what he is doing with his life. Thanks for listening, everybody. We sure love you. Merry Christmas. Ian, thanks for coming and joining us on the podcast.
Lovely to see you, cousin.
Very great to see you, cuz. Have you watched The Bear?
I have not, but I'm assuming what you're about to tell me is the reason why I should.
10 out of 10.
Okay.
You should I would recommend the first two seasons.
Your hair is in the inspiration for that?
No.
Okay.
But they call each other cuz.
Okay,
it's this kind of like Chicago Italian thing, and they call each other cuz. Okay. And it's this like sweet little term of endearment. So what up, cuz? Ian, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Cool.
Introduce yourself to our listeners.
I will. Hey, everybody. Ian Scherber. I am a proud Duluthian, but I work in St. Cloud consistently. A lot of my roots are actually from St. Cloud and the surrounding central Minnesota area. I'm the current vice president of business development for a scrub brand called Janu. But outside of that...
Will you spell Janu quickly in case people wanted to look it up?
J-A-N-U-U.
A-W. It's a whole vacuum situation.
It's pretty cool. But yeah, I've spent a large part of my adult years in St. Cloud. I went to St. John's, graduated in 2015. But growing up, coming through here with family has always been a reason to call this place home. And obviously coming back to see you today regarding family is always fun.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And the Santa hat you got on, this is kind of just like normal.
This is us.
This is just normal.
Yeah. I mean, it's cold out.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feeling jolly.
Do you see that mine is the size of my children's? Because this is my child's.
It looks good though.
Yeah, thank you.
It looks good. I thought you just gave me this one because I had a bigger head than you.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that's true.
Yeah. That's what I had thought upstairs, honestly. Yeah.
So. Okay. So Ian, you went to St. John's.
Yeah.
And then started a handful of businesses, kind of a serial entrepreneur of sorts. Mm-hmm. Probably no of sorts needed. And then you jumped into Janu. I kind of want to ask you about jumping into Janu. Because the only thing that I have known about you since you were, little thing, Ian and I, first cousins, my mom, Ian's dad, brother and sister. And I'm about 9 or 10 years older than Ian. But one of my, like an early memory of you, even as a young teen, was kind of your entrepreneurial spirit. Then you showed up at St. John's, were a business major pursuing the entrepreneurship track at St. John's, and then started a bunch of businesses. All of this nothing was surprising about any of that. And then you jumped into a big giant corporate structure and ladder. And so I want to get to some of that in a little bit. Because I think it's super interesting. But in the meantime, we do something, maybe tell us a couple of the things that maybe you have been a part of, a couple that you've started. Yeah.
I think growing up in Minnesota in general, or, if you live in a certain spot, central Minnesota, outside of the Twin Cities, I think there's
outstate, I think is the word. Yeah.
Okay. There's kind of a grit that I think you have, and maybe it's everybody, maybe it's not, but I think growing up in Duluth, you were subject to hard work. I think whether it's who you are or it was bestowed upon you, and I'm assuming, knowing you, it's probably similar to central Minnesota, but there's this kind of like baptism of hard work that you are raised into, born into. And you don't realize it until you're at football practice one day and the coach asks you why you're practicing so hard. And then you laugh about it, right? Because you're like, it's who I am. I didn't know there was like another volume to this, or I could turn this down. So in high school, growing up and not having a lot of support on the financial side from my parents, God bless them, love them both. But you find yourself in a situation in high school when you're trying to find your way and also kind of keep up, right? And maintain even early on a status, right? So I started finding ways to make money, whether it was cutting grass or stealing apples off my neighbor's tree and then selling them back to him on a door-to-door campaign. You'd find ways to make money and be thrifty in a way. And that led to like, there was this other thing that I had deep down. I have 2 older brothers, and hand-me-down clothes is like, case 101. We've all had them. For some reason, as I got older and I got into like middle school and high school, I had this like, I really don't want to have hand-me-down clothes anymore. And it created this like, what do I need to do to not wear those? And I didn't have, the financial income to support it. So I found ways to make money, and then I would go to like TJ Maxx and I'd stretch a $20 bill as far as I could. So much so that in my high school yearbook, I got voted best dressed, which is hilarious. And I had some people ask me upon graduation, like, why am I so wealthy? Which you and I both know is hilarious. So I got involved early on in a t-shirt shop in Proctor. I was looking for a job. I asked the local hardware store. It was actually a librarian because his brother owned the hardware store. And I said, I'm looking for a job. Do you want to, could I get a job with your brother down at the hardware store, maybe in the lumber yard? And he's like, yeah, just go talk to him. I called him. He knows you're coming. When I got there on my bike, which is funny, he was unloading some screen printing equipment, and I asked him what that was. I was kind of nervous, and I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me, and I'm asking him for a job. And he's like, you're, 5'8", 122 pounds. You can't really move any lumber, and you're 13 years old. I don't have a job for you. And I'm like kind of getting shut down, but at the same time, I'm asking him like, hey, what is that equipment that you have there? And he used the term silk screening equipment, which is kind of a mid-60s way to say screen printing in general. And I just said, what does it do? And he's like, it makes, custom apparel, custom t-shirts. And I immediately just like jumped into this idea of like, wow, that's really cool. Our school spirit was kind of lacking. There's never really been like an apparel store. And I remember seeing, like the girls in high school wear our like rivalry t-shirts and hoodies. And I remember thinking like, man, it'd be really cool to make something. Yeah. So I go to football practice, just make the team. I'm walking off the field. I can like hear the sound of like gravel cleats, and the coach is saying like, hey, I'm looking for some t-shirts. And I pipe up and say that I can do it. And he's like, okay, get me a quote. I'm like, no problem. I can do that. I go home, Google what is a quote, and kind of fake everything up until I knock off, I go to customings.com, screenshot everything, bring it to the coach. He signs off on it, gives me a check. I bring it down to the hardware store, and as an entrepreneur today and a business owner, having staff, like you think that interaction's hilarious, right? You have this 13-year-old kid that basically brought you a job and then asked for a job. So that kicked off this really cool relationship with myself and the owner of the hardware store, Lee. And I was kind of thrown into this like world of business and not knowing it was entrepreneurship, not knowing it was business. And I fell in love with it. It was just an idea. Yeah, just an idea. And it was really a job, but I just didn't know that I would fall in love with what that job entailed. So meeting with people one-on-one and solving a problem was kind of the end all be all. And I really loved it. It was a way to use your brain in a creative manner. The other one was graphic design, connecting with graphic designers and watching them create something from scratch for someone and build their identity was a really powerful thing that I fell in love with. And then getting to actually make the product was really cool. So those 3 things kind of teach you everything you need to know, in my opinion, on entrepreneurship. So then I got recruited to play football and go to St. John's. And the recruiter at the time, his name's Tom Waller, he's an awesome guy. He said to me, hey, Ian, St. John's has a really cool entrepreneurship program. And I was like, what is that?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's what you're doing, and he kind of like started to educate me on this. And I get in a car, I drive down there, I meet some professors and people from the program. And obviously Central Minnesota being the home of my parents and being here consistently, and you drive by St. John's, all the time going back, I kind of knew deep down that it was the right fit. I got on campus and it just felt like home. Yeah. So, removing myself out of Duluth, having family there, and traveling down to kind of start this next leg of my life, it felt really natural. So I jumped in, I got to St. John's, and I was a terrible student in high school. Could barely do homework, hated it, faked my way through it, sold my way through it, whatever I could do, paid people to do it for me. And I...
Not recommended.
Not recommended.
Young listeners.
Do not do that. It's not okay.
Creative problem solving.
But it works. Long and the short is that I got to St. John's and I went from, this like no confidence, can't do schoolwork, terrible ACT scores, right? Like couldn't really make sense of schoolwork. And then I get to pick my courses, which are business based. And it's like, fuel finally hit the fire and it was crazy. I fell in love with it. There was no, again, back to that like knob of like working hard. There was no shutting that off. Yeah. It was all in. I didn't feel like I was working hard at all. There was no like force into it. It was just supernatural. And I fell in love with everything that program had to offer there, the people, the networking. I met, I met with probably over 500 people while I was at St. John's, leveraging the network to better understand stuff. I met my wife, Mary, happy birthday. I met her there, and it was kind of through this entrepreneurship program that I had asked her. The long and the short was, hey, will you start, making backpacks with me? And it was kind of a joke because she was making like knockoff Vera Bradley bags and like selling them. And I saw that and I had this idea, and it was kind of like a way to ask her out. And she said yes. I'm like, well, I now have to build a business around this idea. Otherwise this isn't going to work. So that's a love story in and of itself. We launched that Kickstarter campaign. It was successful and I wanted to drop out, and she kind of was like, hey, you're not going to do that. Yeah. You're going to be the first to graduate. You're going to stay in. And I did. And I'm very thankful that I was able to kind of, finish college.
Push through.
Yeah. I then got into a spot where you are building businesses. You go to this fantastic school, you travel all over the world, you're in pitch competitions, business plan competitions, you have these incredible mentors around you. You have this ability to create a business outside of the classroom and then apply it in the classroom and connect the two pieces and get this just incredible kind of like belt of knowledge. But then graduation comes, right? And you're like, I have to make a choice. Am I going to go get a job, or am I going to try to make this work? And student debt is always that big, like, man, this big black eye, it's coming for me at some point. Is it going to be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? I got to start paying on this soon. How do you kind of make sense of that? And I think knowing what I know now, building stuff in your 20s and figuring out how to fail fast and express your brain in a creative way is some of the best things you can do. And
for sure,
I jumped in. I had some mentors say, you're never going to have a better time to do it. You should pursue it. So I moved back to Duluth. I spent the last 6 months of graduation traveling back and forth, building a business, hiring people. Mary and I would travel in between like class days. We'd have class on a Thursday. We'd go home on a Tuesday night. We'd print Wednesday. We'd come back to try to build that book of business so that we could have something to kind of graduate into. And then graduation hit, and we graduated in December of 15. And there is no better time to start a t-shirt business than January in Duluth, Minnesota. Yeah. I was humbled. I remember sitting up there at a desk. I mean, it was probably 52 degrees. Inside. Lived where I worked, also not recommended. But I did everything I could to kind of make that work. And it was her and I, and a lot of long days and trying to employ people, your friends, anybody that could support you. And I've had so much, I would say the luck inside of the work has been in the people that surround you. And I just had really awesome luck with having people get on board and stay with me and make all this kind of work. But we launched it, and we stuck to growing it to the best of our ability, hiring good people, finding good people, and working long days. And those long days turned into success. Yeah. And I would recommend that to anybody. Start something, try it. You're going to learn 10x what you thought you would. And it was scary. But we launched Duluth Screen Printing essentially in May of 2016, 2015. So kind of coming up on the 10-year mark. And we stuck to just hiring really good people and trusting in the process and creating t-shirts that people wanted to wear versus rags that all of us have had.
Yeah.
And that messaging really hit home with a lot of people.
I think that one of my favorite things in thinking about your kind of journey through all of that was when you were 18, you were a freshman at St. John's, and you were there for football, so you were there before everybody else. So you would have been 18, and so I would have been, like an adult by then. I had, a couple of businesses, and I was an adult, and I went and picked you up, and I was like, oh, I'll go pick up Ian. Like if people bought me groceries when I was in college, it was like just like a huge. I was like, oh, let's go get some groceries, or a shirt, whatever, right? The kinds of things that college kids need, right? And we're just driving around, and I asked you, I said, Ian, what are you the most excited about for college? You were 18, tall, handsome kid. I thought, oh, he's going to say like, freedom, and I get it. There's going to be fun college, whatever. Just like I was expecting maybe the kind of thing that normal college kids would say, at the very beginning of their college career. And you said, and I remember it verbatim, I am excited about the networking opportunities that being an alum of St. John's University will provide me. And I was like, yeah, this one's different. Yeah, this is a different kind of thing, because you hadn't even had a class yet. Yeah. And you were like, the reason I'm here is that 4 years from now, I'm going to be a part of a really important network. Yep. And I was like, yeah, Ian's going to figure this thing out, and he'll go far.
I get asked that all the time still today. Like, hey, was college worth it for you? Do you recommend it? Like, school is expensive. And I say, absolutely. Like I was able to leverage the network, and I still do to this day. And I think anybody that, when you're looking at a college, depending on what you're getting yourself into, looking at the dividends it can pay afterwards is something to really understand. And the St. John's network, that stamp of paper beyond that, I think is really valuable. And it has helped me so much in a lot of different ways.
And I'm going to give the nuanced side of that. And I am less convinced than Ian is that college is the right fit. I think that forever we were told that college is the right fit for everybody. And so you should take on all of the debt. You should spend these 4 really important kind of like go build something kind of years. Most of the time you're not married. You don't have lots like kind of tying you down. So why don't you go sit in a classroom, heap on this, $100,000+ worth of debt and do it. I think it's just the pool of people that makes sense for is way smaller than it historically has been. And so like my little nuance to that is, if you can find a place that will provide you some extra things beyond what education does, and for sure the thing I want to do more than anything else in the whole world is a job that needs that specific piece of paper, then maybe think, if it's not that, maybe think creatively.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I kind of said it, but I was able to take, these businesses that I was running outside the classroom, and then like have the actual classroom work to then validate it and understand it. Yeah. So it was like, to me, it was really.
And was it always validated?
Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not. Yeah. Right. Of course not. Like even graduating from a business program.
Yeah.
There was like maybe half an ounce of education regarding cash flow, which you and I both know is the key. Cash is king. And I think that's a huge indicator as to also like how some systems, even at great institutions, can be broken. And I agree with you. I think any state school, private education, you have to have the right fit for it as to what you want to do afterwards. And I think there's a world in which like, if I'm an admin at St. John's and I can paint the picture for the next 10 years, I would say, how do we build a 20,000 square foot metal box where we can cultivate the trades and have people come in for a 2-year degree program, come in and learn the business, accounting, billing, like all the things you think you should be learning also while swinging a hammer. I think
it'll never happen.
It won't.
And here's why.
I agree.
I have pitched this exact same idea. I have pitched hard at a place that I know and love, my alma mater, Northwestern. And I don't think it can happen. And here's why, right? So Northwestern, Christian college. And my thought is there are Christian parents and Christian kids who would like to maybe be in, they pursue Northwestern for a reason, right? But there are a lot of kids that they want to head into the trades all over the country, but they don't go to Northwestern because Northwestern doesn't have that. But is there some percentage of people that would like a Christian education inside of the trades? I think there's enough. I think there's enough of them that you should jump in. But just in general, the idea of a 4-year degree, it's this especially in the institutional setting, it's this really great thing. All of the people that I know and love at Northwestern, they don't think like this. And I think lots of people maybe in higher ed don't, but culturally we have kind of placed 4-year degree over other things, right? Like 2-year degrees. So if you have these, we're going to paint a little story, these 2 freshmen, good, like they don't know each other. They show up on day 1, they become really good buds, right? One of these dudes is a sociology major or something, right? Like a degree that's kind of built for continued schooling. He's, in bunk 1, and in bunk 2 is this other kid who's a plumber, right? Or an electrician or, something in the trades. They become best friends and all of the things that you kind of want in that collegiate experience. And after 2 years of college, in the same program, one of these kids graduates and they're making X, like in what would be their 3rd year of college. Now their best friend and all of their other former classmates are continuing in higher ed, not making any money, but actually paying money. And then when they get out of school, they're making 0.5x,
Yep.
And I think the longer that a program like that goes, where they're paired together, the more they actually highlight some of this like discrepancy between how we've thought about higher ed in the past and maybe the low place that we have thought about 2-year degrees and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think they can't elect for it. They can't sign on because it would ultimately just highlight some of the actual discrepancy that exists in the 2 degrees. Thoughts?
I agree. I think there's also a brand connotation there, but I think regardless, if you look at the amount of kids that you can pull from now that are going into college, regardless, like the population, I think there's like such a small field to grasp that the days of, the 2000 to 2005 or even beyond that college years are they're probably gone,
for sure.
Unless I'm wrong on the math, but from what I'm seeing, people having kids is down. 2008 has caused a dip in lower class sizes. And I think there's an uptick coming, but I don't think it's big enough to justify what you're going to get. I agree with you on that. I also think that you have to survive somehow. Someone's going to say,
figure it out.
How do we do it? And inner city versus outer city, St. John's, rural campus, maybe not. But I think there's a way. Maybe maybe it's 4 years. Maybe it's not 2. Maybe it's you can elect it, but you're learning trade plus business, and maybe that's the hybrid that leads to.
That would be an incredible 4-year degree. Incredible 4-year degree.
I also think that supply and demand will dictate
some of that.
What happens, right? So how many. The computer boom, let's say and especially with AI now, and maybe that's different, but I think there was at least being an entrepreneur and trying to hire graphic designers in a small populace looking for interns. I could find 100 graphic designers that would do it for next to nothing to learn because they had a computer and they would jump in to try to figure it out. Whereas hey, I'm looking for an art major to be a screen printing intern. Didn't exist. So I think there's also the where does the demand drive? And obviously with the trades, the reason that person's making Y is because that's where the demand is.
Yeah.
And I think that, all things level out at some point. So maybe there's a shift coming there. And I would say if you bet on that, a robot's not going to come into your house and fix your hot water heater. No. It's not going to happen. Nope. So, is it going to replace you from a graphic design perspective? Probably not, but it could.
It has a greater chance in that field.
Yes. So I think regardless, education sector, private, state, they need to pivot to a point where they're providing something in that regard.
Yeah. With baby boomers aging, right? We were just shooting a video and one of the guys in the video referenced that in the next 5 years, 25% of all doctors are going to be retiring. In a 5-year span, a quarter of our physician population will be done, and kind of the crisis that's coming. So, and that has to be similar with all of these trades too. A lot of them are made up of older people, and we're losing more of them than we're getting. And so I think we'll continue to see those wages rise, and the demand hopefully will push, some of that action in the market so that we get more of that kind of high skilled labor in our workforce.
Understanding opportunity is a big part of being an entrepreneur. And when you look at Janu and my jump into a corporate setting.
Yeah.
One, like before I was jumping into business in high school, I had like a very quiet secret with my mom that I actually wanted to be a nurse. I did. I think it was, there's this like connotation of maybe my favorite series of all time is the Band of Brothers. And I think Doc in that, there was just this like, man, like taking care of people seems like an awesome thing. And, having some family members that have suffered from stuff where you see the benefit and what these people can do, a massive appreciation for it. So that, and then mixed with just not being a good student, I kind of was like, wow, I'm probably never going to be a nurse. Thankful that I'm not. So there was always this draw to get into the healthcare space. But point being, in the next 10 years, the amount of jobs hired in the US that are going to be strictly driven to take care of the aging boomer population is unbelievable. Yeah. So I think there's, recognizing opportunity and understanding where you can see it and also feeling good about it is a really cool thing. So healthcare to me has always been how do you do it without inventing a software and jumping in to do insurance or whatever it might be. Like how do you do it? And the scrub, the apparel obviously is a great fit for me on the back end of that.
Sure is.
So it was a really easy jump in and that all kind of started when COVID hit, 2020. At that stage, I was 12 years into printing T-shirts, which I don't know what the average is nowadays and how long people stay at a job, but 12 years is a pretty good stint.
It's a long time.
And I kind of had this like, Mary and I, she and I worked really hard for 5 years. We worked 7 days a week. We didn't really participate in any fun activities outside of printing T-shirts and building a business, which, you're on the grind and you're throwing away your early years of the 20s, which is where I think you can get ahead. But 2020 hits, and at this time, her and I were like, man, like we really want a family, and we've been trying for a while. So finally, we were successful, and we had a baby boy in November of 2020, baby Fjord, who's a proud, feisty, giant 4-year-old that is in 7T clothes today. And that. Going through that experience obviously further validated my appreciation for healthcare workers across the entire world, but also really put a lot of things into perspective. And I think, one thing you and I have never really spoken in depth on is this concept, but like there's a difference in being an entrepreneur before kids and after kids.
Yeah, drastically different.
And I'm not saying like fiscally, I'm saying like your DNA. I'm not the same person I was, period. And it's not even like reversible, but like I had and it's not in like a prehistoric driving trait of like, I have to take care of this human being. I think just perspective and also appreciation for life and having a very different reason to live and survive is 100%. Kind of what took place. So 2020 hits, the world's crazy. We have this baby and he's got some issues and I'm, still on the grind in business. And I realized like, no matter what happens with my son or marriage or having more kids and building a family, like this is different. I have to like really figure out how am I going to do what's different for myself than what I was born into. And I had this big epiphany, like if I can't get out of these companies in a sustainable way, there's no way I'm going to have the true wealth in life that I would say, which is time with your family. So I kind of realized that and I started to feel it. And, Mary has been just an incredible reminder of like, you've worked so hard so that you can kind of raise your kids. So I knew that in 2020, I had to like figure out a way to start transitioning out of the businesses. And at that time I had started, probably 6 or 7 different entities. Some of them had failed, some of them have continued on. And I've always valued the micro revenue stream, the micro income. Like how do you diversify enough to where you can build other things and you can use that team to leverage inefficiency. And, your one graphic designer can build for 4 different brands and your one marketing entity can control 6 different companies. Like how do you ration that power that's typically overhead in one entity and then use it and leverage it to build other companies? And, in 2018, 2019, 2020, we really did that. We diversified, we launched a tree care business, and we knew that other companies were in the hopper, including Obank, which is in St. Joe today, which is awesome. So the long and the short there is I knew I had to get out. And how do you do that? One, it starts with having really awesome people. And being fortunate enough and lucky enough to have those people believe in the vision that you've set forth and stay with you.
And willing to step into maybe new roles too.
Jump in. Yeah. And I've preached that like the absence of myself is an opportunity for you.
100%.
And I think if you look at the ceiling or a dead end job, what you want to create as an entrepreneur is the opposite of that in a lot of ways. So how do you instill that in people? And I've always had this, like, back to the school thing, like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I need a bigger stamp on a bigger piece of paper so that I can have a conversation with someone and they can take it seriously. And I think in recent years that has changed a lot. But in 2018, 2019, I was looking heavily at how to, I should go get my MBA. I should continue my education. I need to continue to be better. And, self-reflection of just improvement was always kind of in the back of my mind. So I started to really create transition plans with the team and was able to successfully exit the business. Some fiscally, and then also some just on a higher level scale of no longer participating. Yes, which then set the course of, like, what is next for me? I've had a lot of fun. I've had a lot of, what I think a lot of people would call success in setting up a business. And I feel the best when I'm starting stuff. That's my rush. Yeah. That's my flaw. 100%. And I think there's between you and I, there's probably a DNA trait there with our grandpa who was very similar. And even on the Plotnick side, which we maybe haven't touched on, but my mom's side, her grandpa was a, knife maker, plow, it's cool. Right. So, like, at what point is this the mind, DNA based to where you're, like, set to push the envelope there?
Predisposed to stuff.
I think so. But it got to a point where I said, okay, I gotta do something. And I looked long and hard and I said, maybe it's in Duluth, maybe it's elsewhere. Like, how do I get better? And wanting, like, eager for that nourishment of like wanting to find people that can challenge me and make me better through work and through jumping into corporate jobs. One of them, I was able to travel. So I took a job with Core Neat Digital. And for a year and a half of my life, I traveled all over the world.
A lot.
All over the world. 100,000 airline miles. I did it. I got a global business major and I said, I'm going to put this to the test. I spoke 2 different languages. I traveled to South America, over to Israel, Italy, Canada, every state in the US minus Oregon. I traveled and I met people and I really gained a lot of knowledge for the decoration industry at that time. How screen printers and the apparel industry was evolving and what they saw post-COVID and the trajectory of the industry. A lot of it, from my experience and what I was seeing, was moving to the border, south of the border. Production, the rising costs of wages. You can only sell a t-shirt for so much. So people are folding up shop, sending their business to a contract decorator and doing their best just to kind of hold on and make a small
chunk in the middle.
Chunk in the middle. So I traveled. I loved it. And in my travels, I went to a company called Next Level, where I met Mike Alexander, and Mike is now the CEO of Johnu. Yeah. And Mike and I, we hit it off from day one. And I kind of, the moment I shook his hand, it was like, this guy's special. Yeah. We had a 60-minute conversation, really similar ideologies on life, family, hard work. And we had a great conversation on what's next. And he happened to, a couple months later, kind of be in transition, and he called me and said, hey, look, I'm going to be entering into this company called Johnu. I'd love to have you on board at some point. Like, give me a call whenever you have time or you're ready. And that mentorship continued. We stayed in touch. And my wife and I found out that we were having our 3rd baby, Freya, and she was due in May. So I was able to, have a long conversation with her. I couldn't travel anymore. She needed to be home. And I had to be, the same reason why I got out of entrepreneurship and running a business.
The irony.
I jumped right in and went, probably 10% over that. And I was gone. We had a long conversation and I took my leave and said, hey, I'm done with Core Neat. And I took the summer off. And basically by the time I was ready to go back, I called up Mike and said, hey, is this offer still here? And he said, absolutely, come on board. So cool. I took the offer as running the new biz development team. Yeah. And from like a corporate perspective, Johnu is very, very distant from that. It's a 10-year-old startup, physician founded, the only scrub brand that's physician founded in the industry. And they really have built their name on fit and function. And I think the the big thing with a company like that, or at least just being involved in healthcare, is the healthcare worker. You know, like there's a purpose and a meaning, no matter what. Hard days, long days, what you're doing, every single project, it kind of consistently goes back and revolves back to you're doing something for these people that take care of your loved ones, your family members, your sick baby, whatever it might be. So there's this really cool kind of morphing side there. And beyond that, it's been really fun to kind of jump in and have a mentor. And that was kind of the twofold. So it's this work-life balance. It's kind of the next chapter in the book for me on jumping into something where like
personal development.
Yeah. And I think you run a business long enough, and again, you question yourself. And
like, are you doing it right?
Yeah. And of course there's, you learn so much by just having a completely different perspective, no matter what it would be, what job, what role, corporate job or not, like perspective is perspective, and you learn a lot anytime you challenge yourself and you can shift into that mindset. So I think in many ways, the transition allowed me to realize that my skill set or the person I am isn't going to change for whatever role I jump into. And I have to just maximize my skills and strengths and bring them to the table and be open and honest and not lose sight of who I am and bring it wherever I am. And it doesn't matter what team I'm on, or if you and I start a venture together, if you launch a distillery in St. Joe, like it doesn't matter,
No.
Like you're still the same person.
One of the things you said a little earlier about, I just want to touch on about when you're younger, the way that you can kind of work different and how things change. Like, I think when you get married, things change. You're now thinking about at least one other person and how do I provide a life for them? And then when you start having kids, there's just a drastically different mind shift. I think one of the interesting things is that you have an ability to work in a kind of way when you're young and you are less tied down. You have more energy and more time, really, that you can give something, but you maybe need it more and you have greater purpose for that work when you have people that are relying on you. And I think it's an interesting thing that those are like ships that feel like they're maybe kind of always passing in the night. And then I think about like people that might be listening to this who are on either side of that kind of time equation. If you're on the front side, the advantage that you have, if you are 17, 18 years old, what you have available to you is time. You have an ability to lavishly spend your time. You probably don't have money and resources and connections like maybe you have when you're older, but you have time. And so that's your value.
Your resource.
And so you should spend that resource like you should run out. You should bankrupt that resource. You should spend every last bit of it because it's the thing that you have. And then when you have kids, like you're sitting there with 3 kiddos, you don't have that resource anymore. That resource is accounted for somewhere else. And if you spend that resource like you did sleeping on an air mattress in the very first Duluth screen printing, I have a photo of Ian that I just every once in a while when I come across it on my phone, I just send it to him. Just like just remember, this is where you started kind of thing. You're sleeping on an air mattress on the floor in your very first screen printing place on New Year's Eve, because why not work hard on New Year's Eve? But then when you're older, you have purpose and you have motivation, and so you should use that. Like this becomes the currency that you have, maybe more than anything else. I have to do this in a different kind of way because there are people that are counting on me. And so if you're listening to this and you're in that younger side of it, spend that resource, spend the time, get rid of video games, get rid of silly banal activities like drinking with your friends into all hours of the morning so that you're absolutely shot the next morning. Get rid of that, or spend that resource. And if you're on the other side of that and you're thinking to yourself, man, I'd really like to start something, but the story that you just told is you gave it everything you had from a really young age. But there are people that are maybe sitting in a job who they're
exact opposite. Probably more people.
Yeah. They're already past that thing. And so then what do you do? Like, is this the only roadmap? And the answer is of course not. There are so many incredible stories of people who actually start later in life. You just have to use the resource that you have in how you start that. And so you're not going to be able to sleep on the floor at your photo studio many nights a week because you're trying to edit weddings while you're also shooting weddings and all that stuff, but these are the kinds of things that you have to do when you're starting out. One of my favorite just little stories, I was in our first studio sleeping on the floor and I woke up in the morning and I'm looking at a mouse straight in the face. And I remember the thought process of like, that's a mouse. I'm still in that groggy thing. It's like, what a crazy thing that there's this mouse looking at me on the floor. And then it dawns on me that I'm having this thought, this inner conversation about this mouse on the floor. And then of course I absolutely freaked out. Mouse ran away and I never saw him again. But these are the kinds of things that you do then. If you're older, jump in and spend a different kind of resource. You have motivation and insight and maybe connections. One of the things that I love that you said is I guess you said it twice. When you're in college, you met 500 people. You engaged with 500 people over your 4 years, and you built a network. So St. John's has a network, but you didn't just sit and rely on that network. You actually went and curated and created that network. Who are people that you know? And you should think about how you engage with those people. And then you developed a relationship with Mike, right?
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah.
And you developed that relationship with Mike, and then you curated that, and you looked to him for advice, and that thing later turned into a really neat opportunity. So continue to meet people and ask people, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And
a big piece of advice that I have for people, young, old, even at that stage of life that you're at, even over lunchtime, if you're stuck at a job that you don't love, be a bridge builder, not a burner. Like a bridge to somewhere, whoever it is, you can always cross it, but the second it's gone, it's hard to rebuild that.
Yeah.
And I think, your network, spider web, bridges, roads, whatever you want to say, I think the more of those you have, the easier it gets in a lot of different ways, because you can turn people. And I think we're creatures of habit, but we're also creatures of empathy. And we all at some point say yes to too many things. And a lot of it has to do with taking care of people. Not me.
No?
I've taught that. You've taught me that. Say yes. And that would be my advice, is build a bridge. Yeah. If you got 45 minutes over lunch, instead of eating your whatever it's going to be for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, getting back into work, take your 45 that you're granted and awarded to, if you can, and go meet someone. Yeah. Go talk to somebody, different industry, same industry, whatever. Continue to use that side of the brain. And if you're 17, 18, 22, and you're partying with your friends and you're playing video games and you're using that as a crux for stress, go the opposite way. Find something that's going to motivate you, because it's hard. Try something new. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to wake up, try something new. But if you can find that thing that you love to do, or that slight tick of motivation, it becomes easy. And the easier it becomes, the easier it is to do. Yeah. At least that's my 2 cents.
I want to touch on one more thing. I think it's a fun thing to think about Grandpa, in that, I was 13 when Grandpa died. And so then you would have been...
He died in 98, 90.
Yeah, I think 98.
I was 4.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I never knew him. I never knew him as the really hardworking kind of business guy who tried different businesses. I didn't know that. I just knew him as the grandpa that I loved. I think it would be, what would it be like to still have him? Granted, he died such a long time ago, but I think it would be really sweet to show him, some of these things that have been built, and with some of that backbone and grit and hard work that he exuded in his work life, how hard he worked and the things that he tried. It'd be fun to show him.
Do you know what a Scherberism is, Guy? Are you familiar with this terminology?
So Scherber is Ian's last name and the last name of the grandfather that we're referencing. But because I'm, my mom is the daughter, so I have a different last name. What do you mean by a Scherberism?
So there's embellishment, I think, and then there's the Scherber last name, and if you combine those two, it's called a Scherberism. Mm-hmm. It's not untrue, but it's not fully true, and it's really kind of better for storytelling. Yeah, it's more enjoyable.
Grandpa Jim was one of the very best storytellers that I've ever heard in my entire life, and I think the thing I love the most about him, and I want you to finish this. He would cry laughing when he told his own stories. He thought they were so funny. They were the very best story to him, and it made everybody else just come along for the ride in a really sweet way.
That's cool.
Keep going. Scherberism.
So growing up, you without Grandpa being around, you then are told Scherberisms as to what he did, right? Yeah. And I think, research or not, from an entrepreneur perspective, everywhere he went, he pushed the envelope. He was that guy. And I think even so much so to inventing, or at least developing some kind of vaccination for turkeys, which I don't have a source, but I think is a pretty cool like thing that I continuously think of just like, if that was something that we knew about, I'm sure there was a zillion other things that he's done. And I think it's hand me down in some regard. I think the brain, I mean, we're cousins, very similar in a lot of ways. And I think about that a lot. I think it's kind of in your blood in some regard, and it's how you use your brain differently. And
yeah, it could be a nature nurture. You know, there's maybe a nurture thing associated with that too, like what you grow up seeing too.
I said I love the start.
Yeah,
and the look on your face. I hope this camera is showing it now. Is like you were. Yeah, it's exactly who you are as well.
I know that. I know that. But yeah, there's obviously something. There's lots of similarities between you and I and kind of what makes us tick. I think for me, in relationship to like loving the start, that has always been true. And I dream about more things, and I do love the start. I think as I've grown, I would say in the last handful of years, I have been, I think, successful in actually like squashing that impulse a little bit, because that continued impulse isn't a great determiner of, I think, long-term success. If you are obsessed with only starting things, it's hard to actually like grow something really, really special, because you end up neglecting something that you've already started that's special.
So much time. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And so I think over the last handful of years, in part because of having a really, really good team, been able to, I think, squash a lot of the start impulse and foster some of the grow and maintain impulse.
Yep. I'm a sprinter, not a marathoner. And I think some of the like mental health stuff too is like, how do I put myself so far into a hole where like I can't start something else for somebody or myself?
Right.
And I think a lot of the health of the companies that I've started, a lot of them have been dependent on my absence.
Energy. Oh.
Absence. You know, like think about it. Like if I'm there doing A, B, C, and D, and I'm catching every little ball that falls, and I'm handling all the weight, like no one else is growing, and I'm not providing, and like I'm the handicap, from like, even from like a compensation standpoint, and of like, if I can remove myself and let it run its course and it can do its thing naturally, you can find yourself on an exit. You can find yourself being financed out. You can find yourself having it scale differently. Like if I get into something, I want to grow it, scale it, buy more stuff. Like I get the rush from that, that expansion. Yeah. So I think a lot of that has really helped kind of everything that I've started be healthier. And in conjunction with jumping into, a different job, a corporate role, a W-2 job, there's still a lot of that. But then I go back to the family, so now it's not about starting other things. It's about maximizing this opportunity that's in front of me, and like really enjoying work and life, and cutting up your day into 8-hour blocks and having time for all of it. But needless to say, I think the drive for starting new things post having a child has really changed for me. Has really changed. I think I provide X in value, and even value, but I'm only bringing my resources forth. I'm not going to be the one that's I don't have the time to print the t-shirts anymore. I don't have the time to do A, B, C, and D and all 3 assets of the business. I have to pick what I'm good at, and that's all I can provide. And I think anything I move into in the future will always kind of be top of mind regarding that. And I think having a mentor like Mike and having someone that can kind of coach you and teach you has been really helpful for me mentally too, to like take that rough stone and, make it into a marble. Yeah.
With Fjord being 4 now, right? With each passing year, he gets a little closer to getting his first job, etc. And when you think about how you grew up and some of the things that you did do and that you needed to do, how do you think about how you want to encourage him to work in relationship to what you did or didn't do? And then do you have any thoughts about wanting him to like take over things that you have, take over or just be a part of things that you have created?
Cool. I think it's an interesting question, because most people probably, or at least a lot of parents, are probably more inclined to think, how do I get my child into what I love or loved as a kid. And I think most of the time it's instruments or it's sports and not necessarily business.
Yeah.
So I'm in this like weird phase of like, I'm having a hard time getting excited to get him into one, like school. Like he's gone. I can't see him anymore. And like, I know that there's this like, you roll the dice on how it all comes out. But at the end of the day, like we have only so much time and you want to spend as much as you can with your family. So I struggle with the release into school. And then I also struggle with like, okay, so now I'm going to send my 4-year-old to school. And then I'm going to pick him up and then he's going to go to hockey practice or he's going to go to this practice or this, and this. I'm having a hard time saying like, that's the right path. And I'm, I guess what I'm trying to say is I have a hard time motivating myself to get excited about those things, even though I participated in them. I'm more inclined to say like, try fencing, try chess, try something that I can get excited about where I want to also learn. And that's selfish, but I think it's also like less stressful for me. And I also want him to sample as many things as possible. Yeah. But the life that he has lived thus far, being 4, we lived at an apartment building 6 months ago and Mary would make like cookies. Okay. And he would come up to her and be like, Mom, we can go sell these, right? And like, where does that come from? Right. Like how it's obviously he's hearing all these things. And of course, when we have playtime, like he's running the coffee shop and it's transactional, right? I want a flat white and it's $2 and there's math there.
That's a great price. That's a great price for a flat white.
Is it?
Buy all the flat
whites.
It's
invisible, by the way.
Right.
It is. But I think there's a lot of me that would love to leave something behind that of course they can take on. But what I've learned is that like, I just got to get him exposed to whatever it might be, because I was lucky in being exposed to business, entrepreneurship, t-shirt printing that like hit enough buttons in my brain to say like, this is really fun. This is motivating. This is awesome. Like do that and pursue it. So I think the parental advice that I've come to find is like, I just have to let him try as many things as possible. And that's the most fortunate thing I could do.
Sure.
Like you want to talk about having an incredible life. It's the ability to like have them try as many things as you can, whether it's food, cooking food, classes, whatever it might be, education, opportunity, like, and having that. So I think that's what I'm clinging to now. And I think if there's one thing that I've found like a really good focus on for 30 years from now that I didn't have clarity on a month ago was there's nothing I want more than to, especially with how we've lived over the last 4 years of the cost to buy a home, just debt in general, the price of things, diversification, families going opposite directions. There's nothing I want more than like when and if he ever or they, my children, need a place. Like I would love to have them live with me until they're 30. Yeah. Have a big enough house or the accommodations to support them so that they don't have to feel like I turn 18. I mean, there's a out of the nest thing that you want to obviously encourage.
Leave and cleave.
Exactly. So I want to encourage that, but also like, if I had my way, it'd be like, move back in. Like don't use your resources. Like let's afford the cultivation for you to do something, to try a business, make it easier and like have you learn that way versus like, I have to do this because of X. I have to do this because there's debt or there's this coming. Like I want to really say like, let me provide that for you and let me push you that way. And I think that's also me trying to get some of my childhood back, so it's me being selfish too, but
I'm sure these statistics are out there. I don't have them. So what you're about to hear is anecdotal, but I wonder what percentage of successful business people are like second generation wealth, second generation business, and what percentage are more like you. Like, I think that you are in large part who you are today with this like insatiable, I need to work and create something because you needed to do that. Yep. Like the opportunities that you are providing for your 3 children today are different than the opportunities that you had as a kid.
Yep.
Right. And so but those maybe like lack of opportunities or some of that stuff created you, like made this like, I am hungry in a kind of way that I can't explain and I just have to build something. Do you think that there's a chance that like all of the neat opportunities, could it do the,
Of course.
And then how do you, and then
I think you have to be reminded. I think you have to have a cousin that sends you a photo of you on a mattress in a print shop, right? I think there's like, there's the constant reminder of where you came from. And I think parenting is hard, and you want to provide as much as you can.
Yeah.
We said we're never going to have plastic toys. Well, guess what? Show up at my house.
It's plastic toys.
There's plastic toys. So like, and it's not the plastic. It's just that like we didn't want a bunch of stuff. And I think there's also a lot of joy that you don't realize you're giving yourself with purchasing those toys. When you go to the store and you weren't able to get it, and then you can buy it and you get to see the reaction. So like you're susceptible to the hard bringing that you had, and now you're, carrying that on in a different way. So I think that's a large part of it. But no, I agree. I think there's that classic saying of hard times make strong men make easy times. That whole thing. I think there's validity there, but having that acknowledgement is probably going to allow you to push it differently. Yeah. And I agree. Like if someone said, do you want your son or daughter to go to St. John's St. Ben's or college? I have like zero desire to answering that question. I wouldn't say yes, no. Like I think building a network, if you're going to pay money, I would encourage again that piece of paper is worth something than just the degree. Yeah. Have it be worth something, whether it might be. But I don't know. It's a good point.
Yeah. It's this relationship between I want to provide opportunity to my kids, but I don't want to provide so much opportunity or do so much of that work that I'm actually shortchanging the development of overcoming hard things. And so how do I raise my kids in a kind of way that actually provides challenge and provides obstacle? Because that's one of the most important things that, I mean, if you want to run a business, you need that. But if you want to be a functioning adult in society, like you need to know how to overcome problems.
I agree. I've had an idea for a while that like at some point I would love to become a first generation apple farmer.
Okay. I've heard so many ideas. Listen, camera, whatever this is. I've heard so many Ian Scherber ideas. This is a first. And I can't.
Do you want to say, are you going to guess where I'm going with this after,
when's the best time to plant an orchard?
No.
Okay.
No. Today.
Today.
Yesterday. 7 years ago, actually.
30 years ago.
My point
When's
is,
the second best time to plant an orchard?
Today.
This is not where you're going.
No.
Okay.
What if you were to buy something that would instill hard work and has an aspect of an ecosystem business in it? That's like a full living case study. So like they're 7 years old and you put them into this, like we own a family orchard and the summers, the fall, the spring, like the only time you're not working is the winter, but in theory, and I'm sure you would be still, but it's like this ecosystem of like, you're going to take care of this thing and it's fun and it's
you bring
enjoyable
in an
and you
outside
brand
stressor.
it. Yeah. And just say like, this is kind of your job. Like and then they're grown up into this, like, oh, we have a family orchard and this is our business, and they get all tastes of it. So I think to me, that's an easier than like, let's go purchase a business and get them into it. Like, they can grow up running around the orchard. They can grow up learning all the aspects of it. If you're an apple farmer and I'm insulting you, I probably am, but I'm sure it's very hard work. And I'm sure it's taking your entire family.
I don't think anything you said implies that it's not hard work.
Yeah.
I
want it to be hard
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's this, there's a optimism aspect that I look at everything and I see that as like, man, that'd be fun. So I think there's something there. I said that to Mary and like, she was like, you're nuts. But then I think, with time.
That's right. Just the slow, incessant drip.
If you whisper stuff in people's ear when they're sleeping, which I have the ability to do because I'm up all the time, and she, has kids to take care of a lot of the time, and she's sleeping. I'm planting.
That's right.
I'm planting the seed.
Planting the apple seed. That's good. Ian, I love you so much. I'm really thankful that you joined us on the podcast today. In a second here, I'm going to ask you for your unpaid ad.
Okay.
Something, or some idea that you think deserves a little plug. But before we get there, if you want to experience some of Ian's creativity and his, some of his entrepreneur effort, you can do that here in Central Minnesota, in St. Joe. He is one of the guys that helped found and build O-Bank out in St. Joe.
Yeah.
And super, super fun team out there. They're doing a unique... They're trying to do a unique thing in the distilling space, which is super, super fun. One of my favorite things about Ian is that he is really, really good and really, really smart in thinking about high level things. And then also on the day before opening, you just might be laying sod out in front of a spot because the grand opening is coming and you just need to get dirty and do it. And Ian is one of the very best at, I think, the blend of those things. Willing to roll up his sleeves and get dirty, and a really, really smart thinker. So if you want to go and experience just a piece of what Ian has built and done, go and check out Obank. Super, super fun.
Thank you.
Ian.
Yes.
Who or what would you like to give a little shout out to? An unpaid ad.
Unpaid ad. I would say that in the world of technology, your camera phone that you take a zillion photos on and you often forget about them and you never print them. You grew up with a box of photos that you were hopefully gifted or at least come across at some point in time.
Yep.
I think that we're losing that. And I think there's a trend of like, you don't have to have like a iPhone X and a perfect HD photo to appreciate it.
Yep.
The Camp Snap, I bought one and I started to use it.
What is a Camp Snap?
Camp Snap is a camera that simulates a disposable camera. It's got like 3 buttons on it. It's really, really simple and it holds about 2,000 photos. So it's kind of this like living memory block. If you just took 2,000 photos and threw it away, it's no big deal, or kept it and it was lost. You know, you'd at least have that framed up. But what's fun about it is it's really easy. And I think for people that go on trips or don't want to like bring a camera and have like the connection back to, I can get a text or an email from work. It's a fun way to experience it and then not look at a screen whatsoever.
There's no screen on the back of these. So one of my favorite things about them is that you can't really futz with it.
No.
You can't overthink it. A photo is it's just supposed to remember a moment.
Yep.
And you plug it in and you get a look at it later.
Yeah. And I think of like, we bought one. We've enjoyed like the time of using it. It's really easy. Your kids can take it, take photos. They can throw it. It doesn't break.
Yep.
But we got one for Mary's dad for Christmas because he takes these like crazy trips, like trips that like, you know, you would see on YouTube sponsored by some hunting channel to this remote location
And
in
he's
Alaska.
just out there by himself.
Him and 2 other guys, and they're like, they do it like for twice as long with less resources, and they call that fun. Okay. And he like comes back and he's like a new human. So I was thinking like, man, like he has these incredible experiences, but we have nothing to reflect on. And also like the odds of him, you know, printing the photos and giving
On
to
his
us
phone.
doesn't exist. So we're giving him one because we want, you know, adventures or family members of like, hey, like you're doing these cool things, like share it with us, leave it behind. And if one day we find it and we can print the photos off of it,
Super
it's a huge win. It's $65. I'd recommend it. That's my little tidbit on like a little family heirloom that you could somehow find one day. Yeah.
My unpaid ad in honor of Christmas, which is by far my favorite holiday of the entire year. From basically the Wednesday before Thanksgiving until January 2nd. This is the very best 6 weeks in the entire year, in my estimation. But my little unpaid ad is go cut a Christmas tree. Go cut a Christmas tree. You don't need it. You don't need the plastic one that goes into the box in the basement. The activity of actually going out into a field, squabbling over is this tree better or this tree better is so much fun. And then you get to cut that tree down. You get muddy and dirty or cold, and then you drag that thing to the back of the truck, and then it gets some like machine kind of shakes it, so all this debris falls out of it. They bind it up. You get to go sit by the campfire, drink a little cup of hot cocoa, come home, figure out how to fight that thing into your house because you got to get a full tree up your front steps. Just the whole process of it is an absolute blast. And it's one of my favorite kind of like rituals or rhythms of the Christmas and Advent season.
It's beautiful.
So go cut a Christmas tree. It's a blast. Ian, I love you.
Thanks
for joining us today.
It was a pleasure.